Hello and welcome. This is Cashflow 2.0, the only podcast that walks you through the treacherous jungles of your financial statements and leads you on a path to not only overcoming some of the most costly mistakes that many new entrepreneurs make, but helps you make your money start working for you right now.
Sweet.
Join us today as Pam changes your financial future and makes finance fun.
Hello and welcome back to the Cashflow podcast. We're so glad to have you with us this season, and particularly on this episode. I am Pam Pryor, and I am here to be CFO to 6- and 7-figure entrepreneurs looking to up-level their game going forward. And the ones who recognize that having and understanding the finance pillar of their business is a critical part of that is why I'm here to talk to you. One of the chapters in my book that gets the most attention, my book is Your First CFO, The Accounting Cure for Small Business Owners. And one of the chapters that I continually get feedback on as being a favorite in the book and wanting to know even more information is on how to, it's called Build Out Your Team, but it's really about finance and accounting roles. And at what point in your business life cycle you need to add different levels of support in the finance and accounting area. And so I want to walk through that with you today. I'm going to go through the different roles that there are and when you might need to add them to your business, when typically we see those being added to a business. I'm going to start at the very beginning with a business that is truly just getting out of the gate. And your startup company, and quite frankly, at that point, you can't afford any external bookkeeping. You can't afford to pay $300 a month for a bookkeeper in most cases if you're just out of the gate. So let's talk about that. Very beginning stages of a business. What do you really need to have in place in a perfect world that's not too big for where you are? And actually, that's an important point that I'm going to emphasize throughout this. So I have a Fortune 500 background in finance and accounting, and I've come through it all from truly the mailroom all the way up through CFO to hundreds of $1 million companies, so $500 million companies. And there are a lot of practices and procedures I've picked up from those that would crush a small business. But the principles and the overarching needs of the business owner, whether it's the business owner or stockholders of a billion-dollar corporation or the owner of a startup, the overarching things that they need to know about their business, which I will tell you right now fundamentally revolve around cash, all of the ones that are important, are the same. So what I've been able to do is extract from that experience, which runs 20 plus years, and pull out only the pieces that are going to be helpful to a small business entrepreneur, a 6 or a 7-figure business entrepreneur. And even between those two levels, it's a different level of structure that we would put in place. So as I'm talking through these different periods of life cycle in your business, and as we are talking about the different roles that you kind of need to have access to in your business, know that I am, in giving you this information, really right-sizing it to where you are. So if I'm recommending something, it is not overkill for the life cycle stage that I'm talking about. All right, so let's deal with startup. You know, there's my staff piping in. They definitely have passion around this particular topic. I don't know if you could hear them in the background, but that was 3 dogs barking. That said, when you first start up, you definitely need to have some sort of record keeping and financial record keeping. And that truly can be receipts in a shoebox. And in some cases, that might be the right answer at the very beginning. But I would argue that pretty soon after that, and I'm going to say at the beginning you wouldn't have any external support, it would just be you. You're going to want to get the information from those receipts onto some sort of a spreadsheet, because the very first need you're going to have in your business is somebody to file your taxes for you. Now, that could be you, but whether it's you or whether you do now go and hire this first level of financial support that you need, which is a tax accountant, which I highly recommend, and there are very affordable tax accountants out there, you have to file your taxes one way or another. And there's a lot of advantage to doing that in the early stages of business because you're probably going to have some losses that will help offset some personal income. So that's a good thing. So the very first out of the gate, the first thing you need is a tax accountant who is focused on just what we call tax compliance or getting your returns filed and getting your reporting done. First level, everybody needs from startup. The second thing that comes along as a need is when your business starts to move along a little bit more so that the volume of transactions are increasing. You're selling to more people. You're buying more stuff. You're moving faster as the owner and don't have as much time to spend on the administrative things. So the first thing you're likely to get is a bookkeeper. And you're going to get a bookkeeper when you're relatively small business and low complexity. Because right now, initially, what the bookkeeper is going to do is serve the needs of the tax accountant. You want somebody keeping track of your transactions as they happen so that you don't have to wait till the end of the year, pull that box of receipts out, and create yourself an Excel spreadsheet to hand off to the accountant. But I'm going to pause here for a minute because although it is important that you get a bookkeeper so that you have everything ready for your tax accountant at the end of the year, now's the time to make sure you hire a bookkeeper in a way that presumes your business is going to be successful. Okay, and I'm going to break that down a little bit. The reason I'm saying this and taking the time to explain it is that a lot of times in our rush at the beginning of our business, in our rush to just get the taxes filed and get this stuff taken care of, we'll let the accountant hire a bookkeeper, or we'll just very quickly outsource it to some sort of bookkeeping company. And their sole purpose will be to serve that tax accountant. You actually want to hire a bookkeeper at this stage who can get on board with you and start to think about how you think about your business. Even though you're relatively small and relatively simple, not complex, there aren't a lot of complex transactions, you still want to start with a bookkeeper who's going to understand you and your business, because this is a gold mine. When you hire that bookkeeper, right, you are putting the key in the door to information. And you can either put the key in the door that's going to serve your accountant, or you can put the key in the bookkeeper door that's going to serve you. And I suggest you do the latter. So let's make sure that you hire a bookkeeper who doesn't just talk accounting, who's interested in learning about you and your business and how you think about your business. And most importantly, as the business owner, you know what your business levers are. You know the things you can do to make the business move faster or slower. For example, you know what happens when you raise your prices, or you know that raising prices is one of the things you can do. It's one of the tools in your toolkit. You know that increasing your advertising spend is another tool in your toolkit. I call those business levers. All of those decisions that you make as a business owner, I call business levers. So what I want you to do here very early on in your business is get a bookkeeper that understands you and your business levers. Because right off the bat, instead of just spending on a bookkeeper to create stuff to give your accountant at the end of the year, you're spending money on somebody who can give you information now every single month that you can look at and understand very clearly, if I do this thing, then that result happens. Because your bookkeeper's presenting you your numbers in a way that lets you tie it back to those. Okay? So that was a long and rambling spiel on the bookkeeper, but it's such a critical role. Think of it as the very first brick you're putting in your foundation. So you might as well make it a good one instead of one that just, you might as well, I'm going to take this analogy a little further. I have no idea if this is going to work or not, but you might as well put a brick in place that's going to sustain the whole house instead of a brick in place that's just going to sustain the barn that the accountant is in. All right, it's weak, but you get the point. You're going to spend money on a bookkeeper now at this point in your business. Let's spend it on one that's going to serve you in the highest capacity. Okay, so now you've a relatively low complexity business, relatively small. You have a bookkeeper in place. You're seeing information on a monthly basis that you can look at and react to, and it makes sense to you. And you're getting your taxes filed. So the next thing that's going to happen in your business as you grow a little bit is your volume of transactions is going to increase. And it's also, the volume is going to increase, but it's also going to increase in complexity a little bit. As you grow, you're going to be trying new things. You're going to be adding new people or new resources. You're going to be growing probably your product line or your service offering. You're going to be spending a little less time in the business and maybe more time on the business, as they say. So you're going to start as a business owner, maybe hiring people to do some of the things that you used to do yourself. So things are going to start to get a little more complex, and you're going to find yourself outgrowing the capacity of the bookkeeper. Not their intellectual capacity, but their ability to have enough time to give you what you need at the next level. And at the next level, you want somebody who can look at your business and actually do some of the analytical work for you. So up until this point, what you've been doing is getting your reports, and then you've been sitting down with them, maybe, or maybe not. Maybe you've been shoving them in a drawer, like plenty of people do, and I get that, because you don't have time to deal with them. But you've been putting them in a drawer, or you've been doing the analysis. You've been looking at them and saying, okay, here's what happens when I raise my price. That didn't go too well. Let me, think about that twice before I do it again. There's a tax I didn't know I had to, that I had to pay. Maybe there's sales tax on your product, and now you figured out you have to pay sales tax, collect and pay sales tax, or whatever is getting slightly more complicated. We don't want you spending your time on that work. What I'd prefer now, because your business is growing and needs you adding value at a whole new level, is I'd prefer that you have somebody in place who gets the information from the bookkeeper and actually translates it into something that's very quickly usable, actionable by you. So instead of you having to go through the reports and ask a bunch of questions, you want somebody who's getting excuse me, I get so excited here. Getting those reports from the bookkeeper, asking all the questions, diving in under all the stuff that doesn't make sense or that needs explanation, and giving you an executive level summary that says, here are the 4 things you need to know about your business levers based on this month's reports. You can still get the detail. This isn't about you losing control. This is about you actually getting more control. Because now, instead of getting buried in numbers and data that you may or may not have time to sort through, you have somebody you trust taking that information and turning it into something you can use, but it's got all the background information there. If you need to test the waters or check things out, or you're going to come up with questions that this middle person, who I'm going to explain in a minute, may or may not have effectively done in all cases. Okay, so here's the thing. Who is this person? And it's a little tricky here because it can be one of 2 people. It can be a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Evolved / interested / experienced bookkeeper who happens to have this as an additional thing he or she offers. Or you could now start to get into the realms of needing what we call an internal accountant. And this is different than your tax accountant. But an internal accountant, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've hired them as an employee, but it's an accountant that's focused on making the financial information in your business useful to you. And you can outsource this work, you can hire this person, but you're looking for somebody that's going to have a title like accountant, senior accountant, accounting analyst, financial analyst, those sorts of titles. And again, there are people who outsource this, but depending on the size of your company, if you're now in the high 7 figures, you may want to think about bringing somebody internally who can really learn your business from the ground up and will take full ownership of that particular area. In other words, translating information to make it useful to you. So we've grown a little bit. We've gotten a little more complex. It's time for an internal accountant, whether they're outsourced or employees. So what's next up the ladder? So now your business is really thriving and your transactions are getting more complicated and you have more people to deal with and there's a lot of size to you now. There's more volume. Things are moving faster, and you're in even more of an executive role than you used to be because you've delegated more down into your organization. Now, the next step usually is what we call a controller. And although these positions, you can hire them, they can be outsourced, you can hire controllers this way, it might be time to get a very senior accountant who's ready to become a controller into your business now, or it may be time to get really hire a controller internally. A controller adds a whole different level of perspective to your numbers. While your accounting analyst is going to continue to grind and crunch the information, or you may hand this over to your bookkeeper at some point, or your controller at some point, and consolidate these positions into one, the controller now really understands what it is that's of value in your organization, and their job is to protect that value. So you have more people now. You have more people with access to your credit cards and your bank account. You have more transactions flowing through all of those. The controller is the guy or gal who makes sure that your assets, the things you own, the bank accounts, the credit cards, the equipment, the people are protected. The job of the controller is to control and protect all of the things that are of value to you. And it starts to become important as you move further and further away from the day-to-day operations. A controller comes in place to control the things that you are having less and less direct control over. So again, you still have control, but the idea is that now you will have it through the controller. So it's time to maybe look at hiring a controller. And I will say in the book, I do talk about the prices for some of these folks as well and what it can cost to hire them. So that's available in the book as well, which is Your First CFO, available on Amazon and in bookstores. So help yourselves to that if you want a little more information on the pricing for these roles. Then finally, what happens is you have a need for the ultimate in financial leadership, and that's a CFO. A lot of people will call this vice president of finance or finance lead or finance director. But what is a CFO that's different than a controller? And when might you need a CFO? And it's when you're starting to ask questions like, do I have the best financing? Are the investors in my company properly protected? Are there too many investors? Are there too few? Might I want to start thinking about what I want to do with this company? Do I want to grow it and keep it and turn it over to the employees? Do I want to turn it over to my family? Do I want to have another company and let this one run itself? Do I want to ultimately sell it? When these sorts of questions start to flow through your head, or if you're getting to the point where it's like a pivotal growth time, like you're moving from 7 to 8 figures, or you're moving from 8 to 9 figures, and things are starting to need a little more than QuickBooks to keep track of it, or you're having international manufacturing and shipping into the US or your home country, wherever that is, and you need to handle the integration with some sort of distribution process out to all your customers. When you start to get these kinds of questions is when you start to need a CFO. And the way I define this, it's when you start to need what I call a friend in the foxhole. So your business has gotten to the point where it's successful, you've got all the pieces in place, but you're feeling extraordinarily lonely at the top, and yet you've got a company full of people and activity and clients and vendors and all of the things that make a business successful. But you're still feeling kind of lonely because you can't necessarily talk to the employees in your organization about these more strategic decisions, because you need to have somebody you can talk to who won't take every conversation you have, every need that you have to vent, every need that you have to be pessimistic instead of optimistic, and all of a sudden use that as something that swings your entire organization in another direction because they thought you issued a directive, when all you were really saying was, boy, I wish we spent a little less money on fixed costs. You know, when you're an owner of a company that has even 10 people in it, and you say something like that out loud to somebody who's an employee in the organization, they can take that as a directive and all of a sudden start slashing things and changing things with all of the best intentions. but they don't have the level of experience and understanding and financial know-how, frankly, to have that conversation with you and know that what you really need in that moment is not somebody to go execute on a plan to slash costs. You need somebody to talk about and understand that that's really a symptom and there's a problem underneath it. You need a complex, experienced mind that is used to seeing business holistically. You can have a lot of complex and serious minds in your business focused on their roles, but when you start to need a friend in the foxhole that you can just say, I need to just spit this out there and have you help me interpret it. I need to think about the fact that my son's going to college next year and I want to be able to extract $500,000 from the business because he chose, to go to Oxford, or I don't even know how much Oxford is, but I'm making that up. My wife is ready to retire, or my husband's ready to retire, so we want to pull more money out. When you need to start combining thinking about your personal wealth with your business wealth, that's when a CFO becomes handy. Not because they're a financial planner. If they're a smart CFO, they will get you a good financial planner or a good tax financial wealth manager, but because you need somebody whose job it is to protect your interests as the owner, both inside the business and for you personally. And that then focuses on getting the most value out of your assets, the things that you have that are of value. Whereas the controller's job is to protect them and make sure they're safe and doing what they're supposed to be doing, the CFO's job is to help you extract as much value out of them as you can. So that's it. That's the run up the chart. And I'm going to do a quick recap here and then let you off the hook for this week. But in essence, as you grow from a small business up to a 6, 7, 8 figure business, and you are a sole owner, you might be asking, what do I need to have as far as financial support goes in my business? And I do recommend you grab the book because it's got a really good chapter on that. It outlines everything I covered here, but also adds some numbers to it so you can see kind of what this starts to cost. But you want to start with a good tax accountant. You want somebody making sure that your taxes are filed and you're in compliance. Then you might want to move to a bookkeeper who is going to make sure that information's being captured in a way that it makes sense to you and links up in your mind with the business levers that you have to move around in your business. Then, in order to give you a little less work in analyzing all that information, it might be time to get yourself an internal accountant who will take that monthly or weekly or daily information and actually turn it into something very usable and actionable by you. Then it might be time to move to a controller who will absolutely focus on, as you move up in the business and further and further away from the day-to-day, making sure that all the right controls are in place so that you can still have control through this person who is controlling the rest of the operations finances, especially as you have more bank accounts and people get multiple credit cards and you have expense reporting and all of these things. And then finally, the CFO. It's time to hire a CFO when you need a friend in the foxhole. I'll talk in the next episode about the different types of CFOs that there are. And I should have said that CFO stands for Chief Financial Officer, also known as finance lead, finance director, vice president of finance. I call them the friend in the foxhole. So with that, I will leave you this week. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. And I look forward to talking to you about how and when and what type of CFO to hire in the next episode. You all take care. This is Pam Pryor signing off of the Cashflow Podcast.